This shuffleboard project screwed me. Well, to be honest, I screwed myself. I hadn't built anything like it in the past, so my quote was way off. I'm going to keep a running total of the cost on the screen. At the end, I'll reveal what I charged and how much I made per hour. I'll also share my mistakes along the way and hopefully help you avoid them. Speaking of which, here's my first mistake. I put the black dye in before mixing the epoxy. The instructions said to mix it until clear, but it's never clear with black dye in it. So I mixed it too long and it ended up getting really hot after I poured it. This caused it to harden really quickly and it ended up cracking in spots. But the second pour filled in the cracks and I was good to go. After it cured for 2 weeks, I busted it out of its form. This is where I realized my second mistake. The slab I'm using was super twisted when I got it. I knew I needed to flatten it at some point and decided to wait until after I poured. This required more work and ultimately more epoxy. The bit I used didn't like going through the resin but ran right through the wood, which meant each pass took twice as long as it had to. I ended up removing more than half an inch, so I could have used a lot less epoxy if the slab was flat before I poured. I had to go over this slab 6 times and it took me an hour each time. I won't even mention the epoxy bit shooting me in the leg the whole time. Okay, now here's my favorite feature of this shuffleboard, but I did it in such a dumb way it's hard to be proud of it. I really wanted to use aluminum lines because they add some pop to the red wood and black epoxy. But I couldn't find any 1/4 inch thick pieces, so I decided to cut them myself. And I don't have a bandsaw or any good way to go about it, so I struggled with the Sawzall for about an hour. This resulted in crooked pieces that were way taller than I needed. Once I finally got them cut in half, I made the grooves, but I messed up the first 2 cuts. The first by hitting a knot and going offline, and the second one after the double-sided tape slipped and sent me off course. This caused me to yell a few curse words at my cat. Of course, I apologized moments later with some ear scratches. These screw-ups were actually not noticeable after I filled them with black epoxy. I struggled some more trying to grind them down to match the top of the wood. The aluminum kept getting really hot, so I had to constantly douse them in water. Eventually, I did get them sanded down nice and smooth, which meant it was time for tabletop epoxy. I mixed up about a gallon, spread it with a brush, and hit it multiple times with the torch. I've probably done over 50 epoxy tabletops, but still seem to mess them up quite frequently. Here I didn't have 2 of the holes sealed, so it kept bubbling until the epoxy started to set up. This meant I had to sand those spots down and do another coat. The nice thing about epoxy is how easy it is to fix bad spots. After just a few minutes of sanding, sealing the problem spots, and cleaning it with alcohol, it was ready for another coat. I sanded it with 220 grit sandpaper and used water-based polyurethane to seal up the holes. You're not supposed to use oil-based stains or sealers below the specific epoxy as it can cause it to peel. Now it's time for the final coat. This time it only took about half a gallon and hardly any bubbles formed. A dirty old fly landed in my epoxy, but I snatched that baby up before it cured. This may be controversial, but I've never liked the shiny sheen epoxy leaves. To me, it makes the piece feel fake. So after the final coat cured for about a week, I sanded it with 80 grit sandpaper to get any waves or dust specks out of the top. Then I went back over it with 280 grit sandpaper, careful not to burn the edges off. Then I used a trick I got from John Malecki. I wiped some Johnson paste wax over the whole surface and worked it in to fill any scratches. This gave it a nice matte finish that still made the piece shine. Now that the top is complete, I'll show you how I constructed the base of this bad boy. The base is 12 feet long. I wanted a nice solid piece of plywood spanning the whole distance, so I glued and nailed multiple pieces together. Yes, this is construction grade plywood, but none of it will be showing as I will cover the inside with carpet and the outside with some old flooring. After I create a basic box, I make the floor that will hold the board. I put in more than enough 2x4 so it wouldn't sag anywhere and would hold the shuffleboard nice and straight. The box slides nicely over the 2x4 frame and I fasten it down with a bunch of screws. Then it's time to make it look fancy with some old flooring. This was given to me by a friend who tore it out of a house they refinished, and I thought this was a great spot to use it. I start by taking out all the nails and planing down both sides. Multiple people have asked me about this planer. I would say it's good when starting out, but not much more. It took a lot of time to save this old wood, but there's a certain feeling you get when you prevent some perfectly good pieces from turning into trash. Here, I'm gluing and nailing it on. While the nail holes add to the rustic look of this piece, I wish I would have figured out how to clamp it and just use glue. At the time, I couldn't figure out how to clamp all that area, but I think if I had thought about it longer, I could have found a solution. Don't get me wrong, I love how it turned out, but thinking through decisions helps me be better next time. To fill all the cracks and nail holes, I spread on some black wood filler. Then I sand it down outside, attempting to catch some rays before my tropical honeymoon. The meanest and funniest comment here wins. I don't know what you win, but give it a shot. Now it's time for the carpet. I've never installed any type of carpet, but it turned out great despite having no idea what I was doing. Me and my wife tackled it in one night, and we were both surprised how well it turned out. We glued it down and used staples or nails where they wouldn't be seen. Next, I moved on to the top trim for this box. I cut a groove down the middle so it would fit nicely over the edge of the box. Then I nailed and glued them down, filling the holes as before. After I sanded everything down one more time, I applied a coat of pure Rubio Monocoat. I wiped it on thick, let it sit for about 15 minutes, and wiped it clean. That completed the box, so I moved on to my favorite part, the legs. I'm using big 4x6 beams from an old barn I tore down. I clean them up with my sander, but am careful to leave the saw marks. Then I use my miter saw and chisel to join the legs together with mortise and tenon. This was time-consuming, but very much worth it in the end. I'm sure there are much more efficient ways to do this, but here I'm trying to get by with the tools I have. I'll show you how these legs come together. I'm very proud of them because they're my own design. I know they are simple, but I think that's part of what makes them great. If I had to do over, I would change how these connect and do it in a way that wouldn't take any hardware. But these screws are never visible anyway. And bam, here they are. I love how the legs have a little angle and a single cross beam on the bottom. Now, for a final, personal touch, I create my own tops for the Shuffleboard pucks. I would burn their cattle brand on oak and my logo on walnut. Then I put on a coat of finish before I glue them on. This was a lot of work, but really showed my customers how much I care. And now it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. First, here's the bottom that I put wallpaper on that had little cows on it. I'll scroll through the rest of the pictures while I reveal how much I made. Adding up all my receipts, this thing cost about $2,000 and 100 hours to make. I must have been delusional when I quoted the price because I predicted $900 and 40 hours, which added up to around $3,000. I explained that it would cost a bit more halfway through the project and talked her up to $3,500, but didn't feel I should push it any farther. This meant I made about $15 per hour, which is no way to run a business. However, I do love this piece and the lessons I learned will be priceless moving forward.